Everybody, as we go to the Chitas of today, we're holding in the portion of Vayikra. Today is the Thursday. We are holding the fifth reading in the portion of Leviticus, chapter 4, and verse number 1. Ve'daba Shalom Moshe Lamer, God spoke to Moshe saying, Da Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, Lamer saying, Nefesh kisechta, if a person will sin, Bishgaga, unintentionally, we call a mitzvah sha'aleisa sena for all the transgressions which a Jew is not allowed to do. But he will do it unintentionally by mistake. Rashi says, our rabbis explain that sin offering, that this carbon, a sacrifice, is only brought, that if it is only brought on an unintentional sin, if the person that did it, that did the sin, intentionally, if he did this sin intentionally, then he would get kaddish. He'll get a penalty of cut off from God. If someone committed such an act unintentionally, then he brings a sin offering. So there's not like you don't have an unintentional murderer, for example, brings a korban chatas, because you don't get kaddish on murder. And so too, a lot of mitzvahs that there you don't get the do it intentionally. You get kaddish, you get other different punishments. So therefore, there's no korban chatas. Ma'achas me'ena. From one of these, part of them, for example, one who writes on Shabbos 2 letters from the letter Shin Mem Shimein, or letter Noyach from the Nun Ches from the letter Nachar, or 2 letters from the letter Dan, me'achas me'ena. It means that because by writing those 2 letters, you are writing a complete thing, really, but you're not writing the complete letter of Shimon or Nachar. You're writing the word Noach. Noach is also a word. If an anointed priest will sin, God forbid, that implicated the Supreme Court of the people. I mean, he was told to do something by the Supreme Court. We'll soon see, as we'll soon the Rashi will explain. El chatosa shachata. Then he brings the korban chatas, the sin offering that he brings. Par ben bakar. He brings a young bull, tamim, that's unblemished, la Hashem, to God, which is called a korban chatas. Rashi says the Medrash explains is that he is liable. He's only liable for a sin offering in case of an eluded matter, which means an erroneous ruling. The court set somebody to do something to this kohen, and he did it, along with the resultant unintentional act, as it says regarding the guilt of the people. A matter eludes the eyes of the community, and the people transgress. However, its straightforward meaning is, according to the Agadic explanation, when the high priest sins, it reinforces the guilt of the people. That's the point. Ashma sa'am. Rashi says the 2 ways will ashma sa'am to the sin of the people. Why if the Kohen Gadol sins, it's the sin of the people. So first of all, the Kohen Gadol, so he followed what the court told him to do. So that's one way of looking at it. Number 2 is that no, we're not talking about a situation. We're talking about a personal situation. The Kohen Gadol did something wrong. But when a Kohen Gadol does something wrong, it affects everybody. Lashma saham. So, because he represents the people. And when a person that represents the people does something wrong, it affects the whole people. So when the high priest sins, it reinforces the guilt of the people, since they rely on him to atone for them and to pray for them. And right now, the guy is a sinner himself. And he lacks this ability now because he became tainted by sin. So therefore, it's la'ashma sa'am, it's for the sin of the people. Par, well, it means a bull. I might think it means an old one. It doesn't say exactly. Therefore, the Torah says ben bakar, that it needs to be a young one. I might think it's very young. Very young is suitable. Therefore, it says par. So why does the pasuk say par ben bakar? So we know when it's par is a bull already. Ben is young. So how do you put the 2 together? And the answer is it's in the third year. The Gemara says, par ben sholish. It's a par in the third year of age. So that's considered a young but a bull. You should bring this bull, par, to the door of the tent of meeting. Hashem before God, and he puts his hand on the top of this par, and he slaughters this par before God. So this is an interesting law, and that is that the chatas of of a kohen gadol, or the chatas ultimately like Yom Kippur, have something in similar, and that is that the blood was brought into the Beis Hamikdash. A regular chatas was brought outside. Blood was sprinkled outside. But when it came to the par of Yom Kippur, the blood was brought inside. So that's impossible. The kohen will take from the blood of the bull. Usually he puts it he puts the blood only on the mizbeach. Over here he brings the blood into the oil moed. Now she says that oil moed lemishkan, he brings it into the tabernacle. Beis Elamim, in the Beis Hamikdash, ultimately the temple in Yerushalayim, he brought it into the Beis Hamikdash itself. What does he do? The kohen dips his finger into the blood that he brought in, and he sprinkles from the blood 7 times lefnei Hashem before God. He sprinkles it onto the pareiches, on the curtain that separated the holy and the holy of holies. What does it mean, pnei pareiches? To the face of the curtain, in the front of the most holy point. Where's that? Directly in front of the space between the 2 poles. So we know that the Aron always had its poles in it, and the poles used to stick out through the curtain. So we knew exactly where the Aron was in the Holy of Holies, because the curtain had these 2 protruding poles that were stuck out through the curtain. So you knew exactly where the Aron was situated, and where the middle of the Aron was in the middle of the Aron, was in between those 2 poles. The blood was aimed so that it not touch the curtain, that you didn't want to hit the curtain. Pnei pareiches means that it was in front of the curtain, towards the curtain. So he sprinkled it towards the curtain, try to make sure that it didn't hit the curtain, and it fell on the floor in front of the curtain. But if it touched the curtain, if the blood got onto the curtain, so it got onto the curtain. Verse number 7, then the kohen gadol took from the blood, and he put it on the corners of the incense altar in the Beis Hamikdash, Fnei Hashem, for God, which is in the tent of meeting. But Kol Adam, then he took the rest of the blood. He went out of the Mishkan, and he poured it. He poured the rest of the blood onto the foundation of the altar of the carbon, which is at the tent, which is the entrance of the tent of the meeting. Now she says, Kol Adam, all the blood means the rest of the blood. Verse number 8, then he removes all the fat from the sin bull offering, as the fat that's covering the innards, and the fat that is on the innards. Now she says, Chelbe, it should just have said Chelbe, it's fat. Why did Torah state the word Chelav Hapar? We're talking about a par. It adds to include the bull of Yom Kippur. As I told you, there's another time where the blood was brought into the Beis Hamikdash, and that is the bull that was brought on Yom Kippur. And the requirements to burn up the kidneys, the fats, and the diaphragm, that also in Kippur was done the same thing. So par, there's a Gzeira Shava, par and par. Over here says par, on the mitzvah in Kippur says par, and Mishnah will learn that. And we learned the laws are similar. Hachatos, this word is included to goat sin offering brought for idolatry. So again, we have the law of another, we'll learn the law of idolatry. If Chashon, a person does idolatry, or the community does idolatry, So there also is similar laws. Over there, it was a goat. Over here, it was a bull. Yori mimenu min hamufchar, from the animal, from the removed from the animal when it's still attached, is in attached state. He should not cut it into pieces before the fat is removed. Verse number 9, and he has to take out the two kidneys and the fat that's on them, and the flanks. And then he has to take diaphragm and with the kidneys, with the liver, with the kidneys. That means you take off part of the, as we learned last time, part of the liver goes with the diaphragm. Verse number 10, as the pasuk says, just like he took the fats off of the peace offering, and the kohen shall bring it up on the mizbeach, the mizbeach of the burnt offerings. Now she says those designated parts that are specifically regarding the bull brought as a peace offering. But what is specific there regarding the peace offering that's not specific here too? The purpose of these words is only to compare this offering to the peace offering as follows. Just like the peace offering must be brought with intent that it's a particular offering, so too this offering must be brought with intent. Just like the peace offering, particular offering, practical, brings peace to the world, so too this brings peace to the world. And in Chitas Kayanim, the tractate of Zvachim, this verse is required to derive from it a rule regarding sacrifices one cannot sacrifice. Now, what one cannot deduce another law from something that itself deduces something elsewhere else, as explained in the Gemara in Zvachim over there. So there's many things we learn from the extra words. We learn many different laws. We really need, as we see, we need to learn Masechta Zvachim and the tractate of Zvachim, which talks about Zvachim and slaughtering Zavach as a carbon. The Torah talks about all the different karbanis that was brought, all the obligation. Verse number 10, 11, and all of the regarding the bull's height and its flesh, and its head and its legs and its waist matter. Now she says, all these mention al here, literally upon, expression of adding, like milvad, besides, that's what it means al. Besides, doesn't mean al, doesn't mean on top. Over here it means besides. Verse number 12, and then it's a chatos. So you have to take the whole part. It's a sin offering. You have to take the whole part of mechutz lamachna. You have to take it outside the camp. Al makom tur, to a pure place. Al shefach hadeshem, we usually used to dump the ashes of the mizbeach. V'sada feisei, and he burns the chatas. He doesn't bring it on the mizbeach. He burns the chatas outside. Beish, on fire. Al shefach hadeshem, it must be burned where you usually bury all the ashes of the mizbeach. Now she says, since there are places outside the city set aside for ritual defiled items, to cast stones affected by tzeras, and for a cemetery, it was necessary to state outside the camp, which is outside the town, must be an undefiled place. So you cannot bury it in a cemetery. That's why usually Jewish communities used to make the cemetery outside the city. So at the edge of the city, outside the city. So too, they created this place outside the camp. They created a pure place where all the ashes were buried, and all the karbonis chatas, these sin offerings of the community that was brought, the Kohen Gadol was brought, and Kippur also was burnt outside the city. Al shefach hadeshen. Now she says, in the place where the ashes that are removed from the altar were deposited, as it says, he must take the ashes outside the camp. Now she says, the next one, Al shefach hadeshen yisrael. It's not needed. It's only needed to mention this in order to teach us that it's burnt in a place where there is no ashes there. So it needs to be not only, so it's not only in a place where they bury the ashes, it needs to be in a place, you're not going to bury it with the ashes. Verse number 13, Vim Kol Adas Yisrael Yishgu. If the Supreme Court over there, the Kohen Gadol makes a mistake, the Kohen Gadol is told by the Supreme Court, the whole entire Jewish people make a mistake because of the Supreme Court. Menel and David may not call, and this thing is hidden from the people because they're following the court. They do an Aveda, God forbid. And they incur the guilt because even though they're following the court, doesn't change the fact that they're doing a sin. Adas Yisrael, Rashi is first to the Sanhedrin. V'nelam Dava, they erred in issuing a ruling that one of the acts of punishable, the Chas v'Shalom, again, we're talking about that God forbid, that they told, the court told the Jews to do something that they would be chayiv kodesh, God forbid. They would tell them to eat chametz on Pesach, for example. That there's chayiv kodesh, God forbid, if a person eats chametz intentionally, the Torah says he kodesh to kodesh, should be cut off from the Jewish nation. So this is what we're talking about. So let's say, God forbid, the Sanhedrin came out one year that you could eat chametz by and the Jews ate chametz. Imagine such a situation. Or they thought they decided this aspect is not chametz, and they found out after Pesach that it actually is chametz. So here they told the Jews they can eat this product, and now they find out it was a mistake, and they found out that now all the Jewish people ate chametz, God forbid. So Hakol v'asu, the community acted relying on their ruling. So now the High Court comes out after Pesach and says, my dear friends, we all made an Aveda. We said the product is good to eat on Pesach, and now we have realized that it's chametz. So if they did this intentionally, it's chayiv kodesh. Torah says you eat chametz on Pesach, you get a cut off from God. But here they did it unintentionally, or didn't do it intentionally to make the Jewish people sin. So again, they have to bring a korban chatas. We got to bring a korban chatas. We have to bring a sin offering for the community. They do and then when the sin has committed discovered, Bezdin comes out and says in proclamation, we made a mistake, and now the Jewish people ate chametz unintentionally on Pesach, God forbid. So again, the community has to come together and bring a sin offering, a par, a bull, ben bakar, which is comes from the cattle. Lachatas for a sin offering. It brings it before the tent of meeting, verse number 15. And the elders of the community will lift their hands upon this bull. They'll sacrifice the part before God. Again, this carbon the blood was brought in to the oil moed. And the kohen will bring it into the oil moed. The blood will bring it to the oil moed. That's about damage. He's going to dip his hand into this blood. And he'll sprinkle it, the blood, in front of the curtain, towards the curtain. So now she says, if you listened into the words of the Torah, you'll realize that the Torah changes over here the words. However, in the previous verse, when it talks about sprinkling the blood to the curtain, it says towards the holy curtain. Difference can be explained by the means a parable, a king whom province offended him. If only a minority of it offended, his royal house remains intact. But its entire province offended the king, his royal house is no longer intact. Here too, when the anointed high priest has sinned, the temple is still referred to as holy. So it doesn't over there it mentions Pnei Kodesh. Over there, he mentions the holiness of the curtain, because who only sinned was the Kohen Gadol. But over here, when the whole Jewish people sinned, so over here the Torah takes out the word holy. So that's a problem over here. The priest sinned, the temple still refers to, but when everyone has sinned, God forbid, the holiness departs, and that's why over here it says Es Pnei HaKodesh doesn't mention the word holy. Verse 18, and then again he takes from the blood, he puts it on the corners of the Mizbeach, Hashel Lefnei Hashem, the Mizbeach toitus, the incense altar, asher ba'il meir, which is in a tent of meeting. And then he takes the rest of the blood and he pours it on the foundation of the altar, which is at the tent, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Now she said, this refers to the west side of the base. So there was a base around the Mizbeach, and the west side of the base, there was 2 holes in the corner. And that's where the blood went into the ground. So when he put the blood, it was like a funnel, and it went into the ground. So the blood he poured there, those 2 holes in the corner of the base, all the blood went into the ground. Verse 19, and then he takes away all the fats. And he brings the fat upon the Mizbeach. Although it does not specify the diaphragm, 2 kidneys over here, as it does elsewhere. They are inferred from the text verse. He must do it to the bull, as the next verse, or he does to the sin offering. Why does not state it here explicitly? It was taught in the school of Yishmael about this may be given a parable to a king who is very angry with his favorite subject, but spoke only briefly of his offense because of the affection that he had for him. So here, when all the Jewish people sinned, the Eibishter shows affection to the Jewish nation, and therefore he doesn't go into enumerations of this sin offering. And he just says, it says in the next verse, he does whatever he does to this bull, what he never did to the previous bull. The kohen will bring forgiveness, they will be forgiven. Now she says, this one, so he did to the sin offering the bull, meaning stated explicitly regarding the bull of anointed priest. This phrase is added to include the diaphragm and 2 kidneys amongst the burnt portion, as they're specified there, but not here. And also to repeat the instruction of these services and teach us that if one of these blood applications is omitted, the offering is invalidated. Since we find regarding the blood applied to the outer altar, if one application was done, it nevertheless achieves its atonement. It was necessary to say here that each application of blood is essential for the validity of the offering. Verse 21 says, he must take the bull outside the camp, like he did it with the previous bull. He has to burn it outside the camp, like he did to the first bull of the priest that sinned. Chatas hakol he. This is the chatas of the community. Verse 22. Asher nosi yachta. If you have a leader that sins, and he transgresses any passive commandment of God, that he's not allowed to do as a leader of the Jewish nation. So this is not a Kohen Gadol, it's not the Jewish people, it's a leader, the Nasi. Rashi goes on the word Asher. Asher, you don't find it by the other ones. And Asher, Rashi says the Lashon Ashrei. It's like Ashrei, praises. What do you mean? What do you mean praise a Nasi that sins? Praise is a generation who sees that its leaders takes care to achieve atonement for his unintentional sins. Great is a nation that has a leader that can get up and say, I made a mistake. And he can bring a carbon for his unintentional sins, for which is inferred when he regrets of his unintentional sins, for though he thus be able to inspire to guard himself from sin. Because if a person can never stand up and say that he did something wrong, is a very sad situation when you have a leaders that cannot get up and say, we've done something wrong. And Ashrei, it's a praise to have a generation that its leaders can say, I've made a mistake. Or if the sin that he committed is made known to him, because he didn't know. And he brings the carbon, Si'iri izim. So he doesn't bring a par, he brings an unblemished goat, male goat. Now she says, equivalent to imhoida, if it made known. Oy is often also used if. Hoida alav means when he sinned, he would imagine the act that was permissible, but afterwards it became known to him that it was not permissible. So he brings a goat. Then he leans his hand upon the goat head. He slaughters the place where he slaughters the oila. Hashem before God. This is a sin offering. What means the place is shech the oila? This is the north side of the altar. Majority of all the sacrifices were brought in the north side of the mizbeach. You entered the mizbeach. You went up the mizbeach on the south side. So the slaughtering was done on the north side. Chata, see, it's a sin offering. Why is the Torah to tell us? This teaches us that it was slaughtered with proper intent, meaning that it was sin offering. It's valid. Torah tells us it has to be intent. If the kohen by mistake thought it was a kshlamim, a peace offering is not valid. So it has to be done, the shame has to be done for the sake of a chatas. Verse 25. Again, this blood was not brought into the holy into the Beis Hamikdash. And the person the kohen takes from the blood. But he puts it, he sprinkles it on the corners of the mizbeach of outside altar. And the rest of the blood, he pours, or you say that he pours it on the base again of the outside altar. As verse 26. And then he burns all the fat again on the mizbeach. Whatever you did by the fat of a peace offering, you did by this offering. And the kohen will forgive him on his sins. Will be forgiven. Now she says again, like the designated parts that are enumerated explicitly regarding the goat mentioned amongst the peace offerings, that's exactly what he did over here. And that completes the Chumash for today. We now go to the Tanya of the day. We're holding the 38th chapter of Tanya. Now, the Rebbe thus went to explain the importance of contemplation, of meditation, the importance of kavanah, that a person should have kavanah. He has to have intent. It's kaguf b'lei neshama, a person that does something without intent. It's like a body without a soul, because the intent connects his seichel, his own intellect, his own kavanah, his own machshava, and it brings about within himself a concept of comprehension, of passion. It creates a whole different reality when a person does something with intent to a person does something without intent. The question is asked, Alter Rebbe continues, and it goes back. Now he goes back, and he says, "But isn't the concept of the action powerful enough to create this connection? Because the action, the mitzvah itself, is the ratzon of the Eibishter, is the will of God. So what do you need to have more? Why do I need to put my own 2 cents in? Why do I need to put my own 2 cents? Let me just do something out of Kabbalah, so to say, accept the yoke of heaven. Don't have your own involvement intentional involvement. Just do the action and finish. The action itself is a holy thing. So again, why do I need to have a greater connection through my intention if I can have the same connection through the action? Alter Rebbe explains as follows. It's not that the attachment of man's thought and intellect to God is instinctively superior to the attachment through the actual practical fulfillment of a mitzvah dependent on action, the action itself. As we say, the most important thing is action. So why do we need intent? Just do it and that's it. Have no intent. The doing it is the connection. He commanded me to do something. I did it. Why do we need to have an intent? As explained further, The unity with God achieved by performance of mitzvah is described in the same terms as the unity as a husband and a wife. Kiddushin, Hashekidishanu. God sanctified us by this mitzvah. As we say in the blessing preceding the fulfillment of a mitzvah, who sanctified us with his commandment. So seemingly, obviously, the quality of man's attachment to God through kavanah cannot surpass that of the performance of a mitzvah, which possesses God's given ability to unite man with him. We say in the blessing that God sanctified him. What means God sanctified us? That means by me doing the mitzvah, I become on a higher plateau. I uplifted myself. God uplifted me. That's what he said. Kiddishanu, you uplifted me. You made me. I make myself holy. How can I make myself holy? God makes me holy. So there lies the superiority. So l'chayra, where then lies the superiority of kavanah over actual performance of mitzvahs? Described earlier as parallel to superiority of the soul over the body. We explained before the Alter Rebbe says, the Gemara says, doing a mitzvah without kavanah is like a body without a soul. What do you mean it's a body without a soul? It's not a body. Doing the mitzvah is the will of God. Elevates the person to the highest levels. So why would we say kavanah still? So the Alter Rebbe is still bothered by that. Alter Rebbe now goes back to say that like the actual mitzvah itself, man's kavanah in performing the mitzvah is expressing God's will. The Eibishter wants you to have kavanah. And that's a mitzvah itself. God doesn't want to have a Jew only do things with Kabbalah Sel, would accept the yoke of heaven without your kavanah. God wants your involvement. That itself is a mitzvah. It illuminates the divine will contained within the kavanah that is superior. And here, let's say the Alter Rebbe. Rather, kavanah is superior because this too. So it has both things. Not only is it kavanah, Ladas Hashem, as the pasuk says, to know God. Ladas Hashem. The Eibush said, I gave you a brain. Not that you should use your brain for material aspects and only have Kabbalah self for spiritual aspects. No, God said, I gave you a brain to have kavanah. Ladas Hashem, to know God. To your capability. And that is the will of God itself. So not only you have the concept of your own self in the situation, you have the will of God. L'dafka b'seichel machshava, that I should cleave to him with my intellect and my thought. V'kavonas ha-mitzvahs ma'asen, to know the intention of every mitzvah. U'b'kavanah, and what is the intention? What is the purpose of Krishma, of saying Krishma, v'tfilah, or davening, or prayer, v'shah brachas, or any blessing that I do? Or saying Elyon and the illumination of the supernal will, why God wanted I should have this kavanah, that radiates, that shines in the cloth, in this kavanah, in this intention. Kate is infinitely greater. This intent of knowing the reason, of learning the godliness behind everything that I do. And having an intent, a kavanah, having my own intent, even though it's my brain, but having this intent in my brain to have a comprehension of godliness, that before I go daven, I meditate before I make a bracha, I think about it, what I'm saying, what the bracha means, and what is the purpose of this bracha, what is the purpose of this food, etc. This is unbelievable. Than the actual act. This is it, because first of all, it's you. Number two is you're doing what the Eibishter wanted. He wants you. He doesn't even want the act. He wants you in the act. He wants the person in the act. Which is just like the body of the actual mitzvah, which is the vessel and the garment for this kavanah. For this reason, then, the performance of mitzvahs is likened to a body, and its kavanah is a soul. Because the power of the kavanah is much greater and much more deeper in the Oros Havaya, in the light of God that comes into this vessel. Going back, like really learning Gemara here, backwards and forwards. But ultimately, both of these concepts, whether it's kavanah, whether it's the actual mitzvah, whether it's the intention, or the actual doing. They're both the will of God. They're both the will of God. We just explained. The action is the will of God. The intention is the will of God. So really, it's really a very simple concept. And like in every mitzvah, everything we do is to do the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why, right, we say expression in Pirkei Avos, I was created but to serve God. That's the simple concept. So whether it's I'm thinking about God, learning about God, praying to God, doing the mitzvah, the physical, it's all the same thing. It's the concept of fulfilling the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So why make one greater over the other? It's all the same concept. There's no difference in the will of what the Eibishter's will is that everything should be accomplished. There's no concept of changeless and indivisible. So now it cannot be said that kavanah contains more of the will, God's will, and performance contains less. So again, back, why do I say again that kavanah, intent, has greater? And a person connects himself with God by the mitzvah, with the kavanah. Everything connects me to God. But nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe comes back. Afal PK. Nevertheless, again, since we're not talking about the concept of connection with God, you're 100% right. In the aspect of the connection with God, a mitzvah, you connect to God. Your kavanah, you connect to God. Everything you do connects to God. And that's the simple concept. But the illumination, we're again looking for the revelation. The revelation of God within me. I can do something out of rote. I can do something because I'm a robot, because that's what I do. And I can do something with passion. I can do something because I feel it, because I comprehend it. The second I'm a human being and I comprehend, and I therefore it creates a whole different reality in me. That's a revelation. We're looking for a revelation of soul. We're looking for a revelation of godliness, not just doing godliness, but revealing godliness. And that's the big difference. When somebody does something because he's just commanded, to when somebody does something because he comprehends the commandment. That's why the expression of Gemara, Gadol HaMetzuva ba'Emet, great is a person that is told about this concept than a person that does it because he feels it. That was the others, were great people. They felt this connection and wanting to do. We are commanded to do it. We have a mitzvah. By us, it's a concept of this relationship that we comprehend the Eibishter ultimately. As it says by a carbon, it's a great pleasure to me that a Jew heard what I've said, and he does it. He comprehends it. He wants to do it. There's a great difference. The illumination of the supernal will in one's soul is different terms of its contraction and expansion. In the performance of mitzvah, this illumination in a state of contraction, one attachment to God, will not steadily be apparent. In the kavanah, however, the illumination is a state of expansion and revelation of one's soul. When a person has kavanah, when a person comprehends, when a person meditates, when a person understands, there's achavas, what's called in Chassidus, achavas hadas. There's the broadening of the brain. There's the broadening of seichel. Because I'm using my seichel. I'm using my intellect. That's not using my body. I'm not just using the aspect of action. I'm using my intellect. The more I use the intellect, the more it broadens it. The more it creates a greater broadening of concept. The more it changes everything that I do. And that's no comparison. The concept of self to myself, when I have kavanah, and the more I learn, the more I understand, the more I come attached to it myself because of my understanding and my comprehension. Changes the whole thing. I'm not a narrow-minded individual. I become a broader-minded individual. Note in the note which follows. Now the Alter Rebbe goes into a note. That's why it's a colored box over here. Goes into a note. He goes a little bit kabbalistic over here. Alter Rebbe traces the difference between mitzvahs and their kavana to their source in the supernal spheres. That's Alter Rebbe connects it to the way it is l'mayla. Each sphere consists of an ur, a light, and a vessel. Everything in Chassidus is ur and kli. The neshama, guf, the ur, the light, and its vessel. The neshama and its body. Receptacle of the ur, the kalim of the spheres have well-defined character. One is chachma, one is bina. Every keli, that's why it's a keli. It's a vessel, means it has its own diameters. It has its own reality. Chesed is chesed, gevura is gevura. That's the way the Eibishter made the kelim l'mayla. The 10 spheres, the kelim spheres are well defined. The oiris, however, are godly energy, simple, in the sense that they are devoid of definition, unlimited, not restricted to any specific character. That's why we call it Oir Ein Sof. It's infinite light. It's an infinite light. It's not a light that you can put into a box, so to say, characterize it. It's a poshut. You have a different expression, a simple light. We stated this means that kalim are contraction and limitation, while oiris is expand and unconfined. And that's the difference in oiris and kalim. Oiris is oir that is unlimited, and kalim are limited. The very trait, that difference between mitzvahs and their kavanah. And that's why, that's in essence, the mitzvah is a limited thing. Every mitzvah you do has its time, has its space, has its definition. Every mitzvah that we do. We put on tefillin today. Tefillin has its time, the daytime. Can't put on tefillin in the nighttime, and it has a certain box, and etc., etc., etc. While the the light that fills this keli, is unlimited. And that's what you can see. You can learn about tefillin 24/7. There's not a time that the learning of tefillin, the kavanah of tefillin, has a time to it. The mitzvah of tefillin has a time to it. The kavanah of tefillin is unlimited. It's oir. Shkos to Beitz Chaim. The Alter Rebbe brings it down, explains it like a big Kabbalah. According to Kabbalah, it's brought down Eitz Chaim. Shekavanas ha-mitzvahs, Talmud Torah, imadregas. That's why in Kabbalah, Torah is oir. Torah is compared to light, because it's unlimited. There's no time you're supposed to. Gisa b'yom v'layla. You should learn Torah day and night. But a mitzvah has its time. The gufa mitzvah, but the body of the mitzvah, not the kavanah, not the intention, not the Torah of the mitzvah, is a bechinas kelim, is a vessel. Sheheim bechinas tzimtzum, because a vessel is contraction. Automatically, when you say something is in a vessel, it means that it's contracted. It's a certain vessel. Shaydei tzimtzuma in nasava kelim. Through the contraction of the light, you have the vessel. So we know in Kabbalah, the vessel comes from the Ur. That's why it's explained, the deep concept, the explanation that the Ur, that the vessel, how can this vessel contain this Ur? How can a vessel contain an Ur that is unlimited? Because the vessel comes from the Ur. And since the vessel comes from the Ur, it has the capability to contain the Ur. As it's known to those that are students of Kabbalah. Similarly, the difference in mitzvahs and their kavanah is one of contraction and expansion, and respectively explained above. Alter Rebbe now goes on to expand the analogy of the body and the soul to mitzvahs and kavanah. He states that just like in the analogy, all existence is classified into 4 categories, with 2 of them minerals and vegetables. That's the first 2 lower, belonging in turn to the broader category of the body being, and the other 2, animal and man, to the broader category of soul being. So too in the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, you have the Yud-Kei and the Vav-Kei. That's what we say, Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei. That's the 4 letters of God's name. Yud-Kei is the first 2 letters of God's name. Vav-Kei is the last 2 letters of God's name. So there are 2 different categories. The Vav-Kei is connected to the lowest levels of the world, inanimate and vegetation. The top 2 letters, Yud-Kei, is symbolic to the concept of Adam and the man Chai Medaber. So in comparison to an animal, to an inanimate, a stone, and vegetation, they're like vessels to animal and human. That's why the human being and the animal both live off of the Vavke in a way. They all live off of the vegetation and the earth. Ultimately, I come and offer. Everything is not considers everything is ultimately rooted in the end, in the earth. Afarata, Afatoshev, in a human being, an animal, everything else returns to the earth. And so this is all connected, as we mentioned before already, that everything is connected to the 4 letters of God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the tetragram, the 4 letters of God's name. The Alter Rebbe now resumes the thought accepted by the above note. The Chalekas Gam Kalagabar Medegas, they too, the mitzvahs and their kavanah are French in 4 levels. Again, you have ki gufa mitzvah atzma mamash heim beis madregesh heim mitzvahs maises mamash. The body of the mitzvah themselves comprise of 2 levels, namely mitzvahs consists of real action, as opposed to speech, which regarded as action. So you have in the mitzvah itself, you have also 4 levels. You have the physical mitzvah, maisa, and then you have the speech of it. So that's the lower levels. They're both speech and action are all a vessel. It's a vessel for the machshava, the chokhmah and the machshava. Mitzvah to the machshava, and then the mitzvah form with speech and thought, such as Torah study, reciting a Shema, praying, saying the blessing after meals, another blessing. Both of these levels, action and thought and speech, are subdivided of the category of body of mitzvahs. So that's like the body of the mitzvah. Words, action, kavanah mitzvah, and then you have the machshava, the kavanah. The kavanah dafka b'yizbarach hiken neshama leguf. So the kavanah, the thought of the mitzvah, to attain oneself, to attach oneself to God by performing the mitzvah, this kavanah being like a soul to the body of the mitzvah. So they are also divided. So you have Yud Kei Vav Kei, you have the Oid and Keli. The vessel of everything is the speech and the action, and then you have the soul of everything, which is also divided into 2. It's likewise divided into 2 levels, corresponding to the 2 levels of soul found in the material bodies, namely A, in the animal, and B, in man. And so too you have the Chai Medaber. So you have the Chai and the Medaber in the spiritual sense. You have these 2 concepts in the spiritual sense of the person. You have the machshava, which is like the Chai, and you have the Medaber is the source of the machshava, is the Chachma of the machshava, source of machshava, which is the Yud Kei, the neshama. The neshama itself is divided into 2 concepts. You have Chai, like you have Yechida, you have the levels of the soul. Also, you have the same thing. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama is the first 3 basic levels that come into the body, and then you have the Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. So you have the Chaya of the Neshama, and you have Yechida Shebenefesh, the oneness of the soul. So within the 2 higher levels of the soul, you have also the two concepts. You have Chaya, the life force of the soul, and then you have Yechida, the essence of the soul, which is the Chokhmah of the soul in a way. So you have Ave'im of the soul, Chokhmah and Bina of the soul, is the wisdom and the understanding of the soul. And then you have the Nansha B'Nefesh. They have the 3 lower levels of the soul, which is the same thing over here, which is the concept of the 2 lowest levels, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, which is 3 levels of the soul, come into the basic 2 levels, the vessel. So just like in the Neshama itself, that has 5 levels, the vessel to the first 2 levels is the lowest 3 levels, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, is the vessel to the Chaya Yechida of the Neshama. So you have the same thing in this aspect, Yud Kei Vav Kei. the inanimate and vegetation is the vessel to the chaya medaber, to the living force, which is symbolic to the animal. That's why in the concept of the human being, we call it nefesh habahamis. We call the nefesh habahamis nefesh hachiyunis. We give him also the living soul. That's not only is he animalistic, he's living too. And God gives us our life. It gives us our life. And then, which is our machshava also, is also a concept of a physical thing. It's my thought. But hopefully I connect my thought to the higher level, medaber. I connect my thought to the speaker of God. I connect my thought to the higher level of this godly soul, which is the chachma of the Eibishter, so to say, my own wisdom. And now you have the chaya medaber, which comes the vessel to, which comes the to my concept of dibur, my speech, and my action of my soul. And that's the way it's subdivided ultimately into these four categories. But we will continue. We shall continue this thought. But this is where the Tanya ends today. Today is the 5th day of the month, and the Tillim of the day is the 29, on chapter 29. On chapter 29 until chapter 34. If you do those 6 chapters, you do the Tillim, you do the Chitas of the day. The Rebbe writes today in Ayom Yom, the day to day, the Rebbe writes, my Fidik Rebbe, Pivush Rebbe said, my grandfather commented on the saying, the place of man does not honor him. Rather, man honors his place. The term kaved, honor, has 2 implications. One is kaved, liver in the Torah. Yeseres ala kaved, the diaphragm over the liver. Same word, kaved. The Torah says Pharaoh's heart, kaved leiv pare, that the heart of Pharaoh was hardened. So we have another word for kaved. It all depends the vowels, where you put the vowels underneath this word. It's all the same 3 letters, chav, beis, dalet. So it could be written kaved. The sage's comment, his heart became like a liver. What is liver? The liver is cold and insensitive. The other meaning in kaved, honor, signifies the revelation of a supernal, encompassing illumination. What does that mean? The place of a man does not honor him. Place means the circumstance. Do not make him cold and insensitive. Rather, man honors his place. Man has the capacity and the power to illuminate his environment, his place, with the light of Torah and Avedis. So don't blame the place. You have to blame yourself. You're taking the heaviness of the place and you're bringing it into your existence. Don't do that. When the soul descends into a body, it's administered an oath to be a tzaddik. This oath, shvua, implies to satiate. We satiate the soul, as the Alter Rebbe learned. The person in a general endowed with an eminent power to be able to fulfill God's intention of having his soul descent in the material world. And just as is with the soul's descent, so is with every person in whatever place he may be. He shouldn't take the heaviness of the place. He should actually make this place. He should transform this place. He should bring honor to this place. He should elevate this place. And that's the avoid of a person, to take the heaviness of the world, the density of the world, and bring purity to the world. Elevate the place. I wish you all a wonderful, beautiful day. At 10 o'clock today, we're going to have a beautiful class, Sikha of the Rebbe, a Rashi Sikha. We're going to learn a Rashi, how the Rebbe learned Rashi and the Parsha. It's fascinating learning we're doing every week on the portion of the week. And see you all, 10 a.m., either here, Chabad, or on Zoom. Torah Direct. And the Mitzvah, we'll see you all tomorrow, 8 o'clock. We'll continue to learn the chitas of the day. Have a wonderful